All right, everybody, how you doing? It's News Debate. I am Lee. Great to have you with me. We did 4 hours of show yesterday, and maybe we'll do 4 hours again today. We'll have to see how it goes. Check me out online at bit.ly/NEWZ debate. That'll have a link to my Rumble and my Twitch, everywhere else, my Twitter spaces that you can get copies of my previous shows. You can also just go directly to twitter.com/NEWZ debate. And if you really like the show and want to support the content you enjoy, patreon.com/NEWZ debate. And there's perks. If you join us over on Patreon, you become an instant co-host for all of our shows, which means you speak first. Your text messages get read first. Starting off the show with a good friend of the show and patreon.com/NEWZ debate supporter, Apostate Nate. Nate, how you doing? Mr. Apostate Nate, you're a speaker. You're still muted. Are you able to join us? Going once, going twice, swing and a miss. We're definitely off on the right foot on today's show. Well, Nate, I'm not sure what's up. If you want to leave and come back, if you're unable to join us right now with your voice, it could be one of many different things. Elon Musk could be out to get us, which unfortunately always happens over on Twitter Spaces, or maybe you're just not available. All right. So, what we're going to do today is I want to start off with a continued discussion of immigration, deportations, Trump, and ICE. This was a large component of our 4 hour show yesterday, and I feel like there's a lot more discussion to be had. Also, today, we'll do more hot takes. So, if you have a completely unrelated, somewhat adjacent hot take, whatever it is, we can switch topics. But until we hear from Apostate Nate, who is a speaker over on Twitter Spaces, but is not able to unmute himself currently. Yeah, everything checks out. Looks okay over there. Well, let's talk to Mr. Donald Trump, President Trump. Mr. President, how are you doing today? We're going to be discussing immigration and deportations. What do you think?
Let me tell you, folks, immigration is a total disaster, and we need to take action, big action, to protect our country and our people. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Believe me.
So, when you say big action, what exactly do you mean? You've already started deportations of up to 2,000 people a day. What else do you have planned?
We're just getting, folks, let me tell you, we're just getting warmed up. We've got a lot of exciting plans to announce in the coming weeks, and it's all going to be about America first, believe me.
So, Mr. President, this is kind of the problem, is that even if your supporters ask you a direct question, you don't give a direct answer. So, could you tell me something specifically you would like to do regarding immigration and deportations?
Listen, I know what I'm doing and I know how to get things done. And on immigration, we're going to build that wall. We're going to make Mexico pay for it. And we're going to deport all the criminals and gang members. And it's going to be a beautiful thing, just beautiful.
So you just mentioned deporting criminals and gang members. Certainly, you've deported people who would fall into those categories, but you're also deporting young college students. You're deporting mothers and fathers who have lived in America for years and never committed a crime
That's
other
fake
than
news.
breaking. Oh, wow, it's fake news. Okay, tell me.
It's a tough situation. News, go ahead. Let's cut to the chase, folks. The media is out of control. They're spreading false information and trying to undermine my great work, but it's not going to work. We're going to keep pushing forward and making America great again.
Yeah, it always comes back to making America great again, doesn't it? So, this is the funny thing about having my AI Donald Trump President Trump impersonator that I have built and seems to be working very well, aside from not giving us an answer, is that it's actually kind of true to life because Donald Trump really doesn't give you an answer either. I think if the AI Donald Trump actually answered your questions, it wouldn't be that realistic. So I guess I programmed the AI Donald Trump too well. Um, Maybe I'll have to go back to the drawing board and actually try to get some every once in a while. The real Trump and the Donald Trump we have here on the show, he'll really he'll give you a zinger, and you'll be like, "Oh wow, that's a pretty pointed answer." It hasn't happened thus far today on the show. I'm going to go ahead and restart Twitter Spaces. I sent a message to Apostate Nate, and he didn't reply. Sometimes he just listens in the background, so it doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong. But I'm going to roll the dice here, restart the Twitter Space, see if that does anything, and if not, we'll just continue on with the show. Once again, it's News Debate. I am Lee. Go to bit.ly/NEWZ debate for all my links. I'm live on Twitter Spaces. I think apparently it's possible I'm live on Twitter Spaces. I'm definitely live over on Stereo right now. Over on Stereo, my poll, you get two choices. I support deportations, or there's a better way. Let me know what you think over on Stereo. It's News Debate. I'm Lee. Let's reset Twitter Spaces. No, I mean, that music we just heard, that's what happens when you first begin your space. And I guess if you restart the space, it'll play it a second time. No, that's what it is. So, Apostate Nate, I'm not sure what's going on, but if you're able to join us and speak, I still see you're listening. That would be great. Oh, hey, there you are. Can you talk now?
Hey, Lee. Yeah, sorry, I had some audio issues there. I missed quite a bit of what you said, but I'm here now.
I was bad mouthing you. I hope you heard it. No, I was just saying, hey, sometimes you listen and you can't say anything. Other times you listen and you say a lot. Great. So you're back with me. You were part of, I think, almost every moment of yesterday's 4-hour marathon. We're returning to our discussion of immigration, and I really appreciated your perspective yesterday. You made some points I agreed with, and you threw out some sort of questions about, I'm not sure what else I think, but this is probably the area that I'll land in. And we didn't always end up on the same page on those things, but why don't you reiterate your perspective on immigration and deportations, and we'll kind of go from there. Not hearing you, Apostate Nate. Boy, Elon Musk is out to get us today. Seeing if we can try a double restart on Twitter Spaces. It worked last time for about 10 seconds. All right. This is the third restart of Twitter Spaces. I just heard you for a moment, Apostate Nate. Are you there with us? I'm not sure what's going on. Elon Musk is really
I'm
breaking the
I'm here.
toilet today.
I think I'm here. I
Excellent.
don't know.
Okay, you're with
Um,
us. This is fantastic. It seems to be working now.
yeah. So you wanted my sort of restatement of my my opinion on immigration policy. Um, well, let's see if I can. The first thing I'll say, and I'm pretty sure that I was really emphatic about this yesterday, is that I would not want to be the person in charge of this mess, just because it is a long, storied mess. Imagine the logistics, the ins and outs, the nooks and crannies that have gone into immigration laws, the breaking of the laws, appealing to these laws. My goodness. So putting anybody in that position, I wouldn't want to be that person. It's Stephen Miller that's Trump's czar on this. I would not want to be that person right now. Um, when it comes down to illegal immigration, I think that when we consider humanitarian issues versus the letter of the law, I think it ends up in some murky territory. And as I said yesterday, what I would probably do, this is me personally, if I were involved in this kind of operation at all, is I would probably be looking the other way and quite a bit when it comes to people who have been here, who have just been working, raising their families, not getting in trouble, not being menaces to society or anything like that. Um, I feel like this issue is so big that no matter what you do policy wise, you are going to have cracks in the policy and you're going to have people fall through them. And I think that's where you get to the humanitarian versus legal this tension here. And for me, Lee, that's where I kind of sit. And I don't think I'm quite as stringent upon the letter of the immigration law as you are. um, is that the right call? I don't know. I find myself torn in 10 different ways, Lee, and I think a lot of people do. I think it's probably why this debate lasted 4 hours yesterday. I'll end there.
Yeah, it's not easy being the social audio sheriff. It takes a certain breed of person to be letter of the law when it comes to discussing immigration. Yes, so I am definitely more letter of the law than you when it comes to this, but I also, am a human being, and I'm open to hearing ideas of these are human beings. They've been living here illegally. They did not respect our law when they first came, or when they overstayed their legal whatever. And okay, we can still discuss that, but at the same time, they haven't caused us any other problems. They have some kids, whatever. Okay, I'm open to that, but it sounds like you're much more open to that than I am, and I am definitely more rules a rule, especially when it comes to millions of people. That I guess this is the other reason why I'm really into the letter of the law, is that this is negatively affecting our country. This is a huge deal, especially when we have the mass homelessness and just poverty in general in the United States. I just really will die on the hill that I don't want a single dollar going to someone who's here illegally, when there are people who are born and raised here, or naturalized citizens who've been here a long time, who really could use that help. And I think that help needs to go to them first. We can keep parsing out all of these differences, and even if we're on the same page, you might be here and I might be over there. But let's check in. Let's really take advantage of my co host for the last several months, President Donald J. Trump. Let's ask Mr. President. Mr. Trump, a lot of people have brought up humanitarian issues when discussing deportations and immigration in the United States. Are you open to allowing people to stay in the United States if they're not breaking the laws, if they've been raising
Humanitarian issues.
families?
Look, we're going to make a decision on that, and it's going to be a tough one, but we're going to do what's right for this country. And if that means letting some people stay, fine. But if it means deporting them, that's what we're going to do. And it's going to be huge, just huge.
So, Mr. President, who are the types of people you would say could stay in the United States, even though they are illegal at this time?
You know, I've been thinking, and I believe that people who have been here for a long time, who have contributed to our society, and who have not committed any crimes, maybe, just maybe, we can work out a deal for them to stay. But it's going to be on my terms, and it's going to be tremendous.
So, what are your terms? How would someone be able to avoid deportation?
Let me tell you, folks, to avoid deportation, you're going to have to be a model citizen, pay your taxes, have a good job, and be a productive member of society. And even then, it's no guarantee because we're going to be very tough on immigration, very tough.
So, if it's not a guarantee, who gets to decide whether a person has to be deported or if they can stay in the United States?
I'm the one who gets news. Go ahead. The decision is mine and mine alone, folks. I'm the one who knows how to make the tough choices. And I'm not going to let anyone else dictate what happens to our country. We're going to do it my way, and it's going to be huge.
So, to wrap everything up, Mr. President, you're the final decision maker when it comes to whether or not
Let me tell
a
you, folks,
model immigrant can stay in the United States. It's completely up to you
nobody
and no
knows
one
more about
else.
making tough decisions than I do, and I can tell you it's a tremendous responsibility, but I'm a winner. I'm a champion, and I'm going to make the right decisions for this country. And if that means making some tough calls on immigration, then so be it. I'm ready for it.
He's ready. He's ready. I can't talk. He's ready. What's not to like? I like how we're like interrupting each other while I talk to robot President Trump. We got Apostate Nate has his hand up over on Twitter Spaces, but let's jump over and make sure we include people over on stereo. Let's hear from Hooch.
I'm split 50-50 on the deportation. I know there's a need for it, and I know there's a cause for it, but also there's a lot of fuckery afoot about it too.
So that was kind of low. Basically, Hooch was saying he's 50-50. So kind of in the middle, much like many people in the United States who don't feel like they really match well with Republicans. They don't feel like they really match well with Democrats. Maybe they're an old school Republican and they're not so into Trump. Maybe they're an old school Democrat and they're not so into wasting political capital on things like trans rights and which team you play for when you're in middle school, when we really should be talking about healthcare for all and ending poverty and ending homelessness and not getting involved in foreign wars. So I can sort of understand people that are on both sides. And in a way, I'm on both sides too. I understand the idea that you can't possibly deport every person who's in the United States illegally. It's just not possible. I'm also open to trying to do that because if I lived in a foreign country and I broke their laws from the very first day I got there, or if I was a student and just never left, or whatever situation it might be, I would assume that when I was found out, I would be kicked out. And in fact, the United States is an outlier. Most other countries, like Australia, Japan, Europe, other parts of the developed world, when you break their immigration laws, they don't just look the other way. We're the real outlier there. And not only are we the real outlier, we're the one country that shares a border with Central and South America. So you can't really compare us to Canada. They share a border with us. They get to choose who comes into their country. We really don't because we don't enforce border regulations. We are not Norway. We are not France. They have much more control over who comes in. They're surrounded by other rich countries. Now, France is part of the EU, so they have some open border things, but that's a different issue. If you just look at who's coming into France, it's not Mexico, It's not Central America. It's not South America. We are really kind of in the worst position. We're the only country in the United States. Well, first off, or sorry, in the world, we're the only country in the world that's the world power. And then amongst rich developed nations, we're the only country without national health care. We're the only country with the gun violence levels that we have. We're the only country with the homelessness issues that we have, all of these other things. I just, perhaps because of that, if we were France, maybe I wouldn't be so gung ho about every illegal has to leave. But with things being so bad in the United States, I guess that's why I feel the way I feel. Apostate Nate, your hand has been up. You've been waiting patiently. What do you have to add?
First of all, Lee, I think that one of these days we need to do a drinking game on news debates where every time the Donald says huge or tremendous, you have to take a sip or do a shot or whatever. Boy, I think that would be a lot of fun, possibly dangerous. But here's the question that I have for you, Lee, and I apologize if this came up yesterday. There were some things in the 4-hour marathon that I probably slipped by me. Do we have credible information on the economic impact, really in every area of economics? I mean, from private sector to public services. What's the economic impact of undocumented immigration in America? I think that, boy, that's such a huge question based on your concerns, I think, Lee.
So yeah, that is a great question, but could you tell me exactly what you mean? If it's just like the
Sure.
wages they earn, it's going to be very large. If it's how much the government spends on them, it's going to be a smaller number than how much they earn. If it's like a sort of an estimate of how they keep prices down, like for instance, both legal and illegal immigrants who work on farms, who pick produce, that's another probably big number. So what exactly are you looking for?
Honestly, Lee, and I don't mean to to make this seem more difficult than it is, but I'm really interested in everything. I want to know how the migrant population affects wages. I want to know the dollar amount of, say, services that they put on the healthcare system, education system, various assorted social services. Really, Lee, add in whatever you like. I just want to see some numbers on, the harder economic costs of having an immigration problem. I'm sure people have done this, Lee. I confess I should have came to this show a little bit better prepared, but that's the question that's been gnawing at me.
Well, let me try to find that. Let me look this up on Chat GPT, which I love to do. Let me just ask straight up, what are the economic impact? Sorry, what is the economic impact of immigrants as a whole, illegal immigrants?
I would probably see if you can get it down to illegal immigration, um, because that's what's in the crosshairs, right? We're
Yes,
not
I
after.
agree with that.
Yeah, so that's probably how I would take it.
All right, let's see what Chat GPT has to say. I'm sure they'll give us quite a lot of different pieces of information. Let's see what comes up.
And memo to Shannon, if you're there listening out in the universe, you would have had an answer for us already, Shannon. So
Yeah, she would have been tweeting that. You know it. Definitely would have.
great thing about Shannon being on the show is that, like, I don't have to do any research when she's on the show. Like, as soon as there's a question, she's just always there to, like, here's the source, and Shannon knows good sources, so that helps too.
All right, let's see what ChatGPT has for us. The economic impact of illegal immigrants, also called undocumented immigrants, thanks, liberal ChatGPT, is complicated. It's not all good or all bad. It depends on the angle you're looking at. Here's a straight breakdown. Tax. Yes, they pay taxes. I would say A portion, I don't know how large of a portion, but if you're working for cash, you're not paying taxes. If you're paying taxes, you would have to have a social security number. So these would be people who have stolen other social security information from I don't know, living people, dead people. Anytime I've ever had any job my entire life, the only way I could be taxed was to verify who I was, and the way you do that is through a social security number. So I'm not sure how they're taxed without doing that. So that would be that, like, yet another crime. If they're illegal, they wouldn't have that. Um, Unless, well, let's think about this. I could imagine some people who are in the country illegally, but they're known to the system because for so long we didn't enforce immigration laws. Maybe they would be given a temporary number. Let me ask ChatGPT about that. I'll ask that as a follow up. How are legal immigrants taxed without social security numbers? We'll jump down to get this information, and then we'll go back up to the rest of these really good points that we haven't gotten to yet from ChatGPT. Even without a social security number, millions of undocumented immigrants still pay tax. Here's how. The IRS issues individual taxpayer identification numbers to people who aren't eligible for a social security number but still want or are required to file taxes. Many illegal immigrants use an ITIN to pay federal and state taxes, pay income taxes, claim no benefits. Okay, so this is where you have to read between the lines to actually understand this information. So when it says they pay taxes, that is not true. That would be looking at the group as a whole. There are well more. I've seen estimates as high as 20 million. I think other estimates are maybe around 10 or mid between 15 million undocumented people, whatever it is. As of recent estimates, over 4 million people use ITINs, individual tax identification numbers, many of them undocumented immigrants. So these are not necessarily undocumented immigrants, but over 4 million people use the service. That is the only way an illegal immigrant could pay taxes. So clearly, that is a small percentage. I would say easily less than 25%, but I'm just doing some mental math right now. So let's just get this out of the way. When people say they pay taxes, a small portion of them do. So making sure we're clear. Now let's jump back up here. Yes, they pay taxes. Many undocumented immigrants, this I think is easily less than a fourth, which is not what I would call many, somehow pay taxes. The Social Security Administration estimates undocumented workers contribute $7 billion and more annually to Social Security, which they can't claim later because they're illegal immigrants. But they could claim it later, I believe, if they become citizens. So I think that there's a way around that, but that's my guess. They are mostly ineligible for federal public benefits like Medicaid, food stamps, or welfare. However, they are staying in and have been for some time staying in very expensive hotels. They've been driven to their immigration court proceedings. So they have definitely gotten public benefits. They just aren't necessarily getting the normal ones that you or I would be eligible for, like food stamps, Medicaid. But don't pretend they're not getting public dollars. That's been documented out the wazoo. They definitely are. Education and emergency care are required by law to be provided regardless of status. So, yes, they do impose costs on the country, especially at the state and local level, particularly in public schools and emergency rooms. And that's also something that's a problem for Americans because tens of millions of people do not have health insurance. Even tens of millions of people who do have health insurance are undercovered. So, if you go to the emergency room, they can't turn you away. You might bleed to death in the emergency room, but That's not the way to do effective healthcare prevention, healthcare emergency care. It should be something where everyone's covered. So it costs more for Americans to have to go through that system, and it costs certainly more for illegal immigrants to do that as well. In low skill labor markets, undocumented immigrants can push down wages slightly, especially for US born workers without a high school diploma. So I think slightly is a term we could argue, but I think they're talking about low skill manual labor jobs. The reason that many illegal immigrants have those jobs is because they don't have skills and they're willing to do things that born and raised Americans often are not. Hence, they can be paid less for a job that this American, that American would have to be paid more in order to be willing to do it. They also create demand for goods, services, and jobs by living here and spending money. So they aren't just taking, they're also adding to the economy. I guess they are, but I'm not going to give an illegal immigrant credit simply for being here, because that's the problem I have with them in the first place, is that they're here, they didn't respect our immigration policy, and sometimes they greatly disrespected our immigration policy. So the fact that they're here and spending money is not something I think should be considered. That makes no sense. Um, that's like, hey, someone was banging your wife, but they brought some pizza over before they did. Like, okay, like I guess thanks for the pizza, but you're banging my wife. That seems like a really lukewarm argument at best. That's nonsense. Please don't believe like that's an actual argument. The interesting
Depends
thing
on the
is,
pizza, Lee.
depends on the pizza. Hey, is that a Papa John's pizza? Hey, that's a pretty good brand. Um, what I would say is if someone was living here illegally, but they brought their own money. So imagine they were a college student who overstayed their welcome and they never got a job and they completely were self-financed, or their family was sending the money, however that was. I think that's the only time that would be a benefit, because that's foreign money that's going into the US economy. But as soon as someone is working here illegally, even if they're paying taxes, they're just spending money that came from the United States. That if someone else could get the job, either for a higher wage or better working conditions, who was an American citizen or a legal immigrant, they would be doing the same thing. So that's just a really dumb argument. Not going to believe that for a second. Studies vary by state, but generally short term, some states take a hit due to education and healthcare costs. So they're paying for mandatory healthcare when illegal immigrants go to the emergency room. They are paying for illegal immigrants to go to school, their kids to go to school. So, okay, that seems like a net loss. In the long term, according to some studies, the children of illegal immigrants, who are often themselves US citizens, tend to be net economic contributors, especially if they're educated and working. So the kids, I guess, are more likely to be a benefit to the US than the parents. Here's an example. A 2017 National Academies of Sciences report found that over a lifetime, the average immigrant, whether illegal or legal, contributes more in taxes than they receive in government benefits. But the timeline matters. So is it short term? Is it long term? If you live here, 30 years, a little less or a little bit more, and you're paying into taxes and you're ineligible to receive, retirement benefits, and you're not going to the emergency room every weekend, then yes, I mean, most Americans don't get benefits from the United States government. So even though we have less in taxes we're paying compared to pretty much every other developed nation, you're still going to be paying more into the system than getting out. That's no different than Americans. If you take away retirement benefits and someone who is on disability or something, we're all going to pay more into the system than we're going to get out of it. It's the retirement that is the big return. It's the I'm disabled and I have to be on food stamps and Medicaid. That's the big benefit of paying into the system. So if you don't do any of those things, of course, over 20, 30 years, you're going to pay more into the system. That's just math. So, yes, I agree with math. Continuing, the U.S. relies heavily on undocumented workers for certain industries like agriculture. Up to half of the labor force is estimated to be illegal. A sudden removal of this labor would shock prices and disrupt supply chains. So, this is what we talked about yesterday. We can discuss a hypothetical, but it's just a hypothetical. Even 2,000 people a day, which is, I think, the highest number we've seen under the second Trump White House term that they have been able to hit with ICE deportations. That is nothing compared to the more than 10, looking at different estimates, more than 10 million illegal immigrants in the United States. So the problems we're seeing in agriculture now is mostly due to fear. It's not because of an actual worker shortage. And I don't think we're ever going to see an actual worker shortage during Trump's 4 years of this now second term. It's all just fear. So we can talk about, well, if everybody was gone, a day with no illegal immigrants, yes, that would be a big disruption, but it's not going to happen. And even if it did, it would be clear that we were coming to that point, and there would have to be adjustments that were made and could be made because we would see that coming. This is not the asteroid that we miss and is a day away from the US, or a day away from hitting the earth, and we have to send up Bruce Willis to it. It's not that. I mean, we would see this coming from miles, miles, miles away. We would see this coming months and months and years away. So this is not the sky is falling. Then ChatGPT discussed direct downsides. Yes, there are costs, especially at local levels and for low income native workers who directly compete. So for low income Americans born and raised here, low skills, for them, they're losing job opportunities. Now, maybe they don't want to do those jobs anyways, but if we didn't have illegal immigrants, the jobs would be better working conditions and there'd be more money attached to them. And yes, there is strain in school districts and emergency rooms in some areas. I will add the fact that you now have to have bilingual education almost be a norm. It's great to teach kids a second or third language because it's a skill that can last you a lifetime. It gets harder to learn these languages as you get older, just like music or many other things. But imagine living in Japan where every single person in your class is Japanese and they're only speaking to you in Japanese. You're not learning Spanish. It's easier to teach that class. It's easier to be a student in that school. It's easier to administer that school district. So while it can be a strength to have different languages in a classroom, it's also a clear detraction. But ChatGPT adds the claim that undocumented immigrants are a huge net drain on the economy is overblown. They are both consumers and contributors. Now, of course, they're both consumers and contributors. These are basic facts. But I don't know that it's overblown what services are available to illegal immigrants in the United States, people who should not be here, either from the get-go or overstayed their temporary status here, whatever the case might be. When you compare that to just homeless people in the United States, it's not overblown. When you compare that to a lot of Americans who live in poverty, it's not overblown. The idea that they're a complete drain and there's no benefits of having them, yes, that is not true. But if you compare them to certain demographics of Americans, not overblown at all. So the final verdict, according to ChatGPT, undocumented immigrants provide both economic benefits and burden. On balance, most mainstream economic studies show that they are not a massive drag. That's the best thing they could say. Well, it's not a massive drag. And in many areas, they are a quiet engine keeping low wage sectors alive. But the costs are uneven, hitting some states and localities harder than others. All right. Apostate Nate, you've been listening. You have your hand up. What do you have to add? What do you think about this from ChatGPT?
Lee, as you sit there and talk about wages and impacts on the economy, the jobs that people will do and won't do, what you have me thinking about here is, I think, the one of the nastier sides to this issue, and I think the people in my camp are probably guilty of this, and that's that I think there's a certain point where being okay with illegal immigration as it is, does it give some kind of a pass to the virtual slave wages that it pays? Are we building up a slave class and looking the other way? It's hard for me not to entertain that thought, Lee. I'd kind of like to get your input on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point that doesn't get mentioned a lot because I don't think the right is worried about that. And this is a point that the left usually would talk about. But however, talking about slave wages for anyone, yeah, that's great for the left. But for illegal immigrants, that gets into tribalism. If you have any nuanced view of immigration, the left is going to tear you apart and destroy you. So that's why they don't bring this up. But you can imagine, while it would hurt the economy, if we're able to get rid of a significant number of illegal immigrants in the United States, and especially ones who work in very low wage, low skilled sectors where um, the majority of them are not paying taxes. We already looked at the numbers. The majority of illegal immigrants are not paying taxes. And I assume if you work on a farm or work in a giant, dangerous factory, you're probably not paying taxes. It's going to be hard for you to fight for your rights. It's going to be easy for you to be taken advantage of. So if we get rid of those people and send them back home, the only way those jobs get done is by paying more, having better circumstances, better conditions. And that brings in actual Americans who are taxed and can say this has to be better. I'm not doing that. You can't treat me this way. I'm getting hurt on the job. So it's one of those paradoxes. If you get rid of illegal immigrants who the left does not want to get rid of because they're like, oh, hey, come on, have a heart. While their lives are not going to be improved because their conditions are gone, they're often in a different country. The people who theoretically would have to take over those positions, those would become better jobs. Now, we can talk about the consequences. What does that do to prices of produce? What does that do to prices of goods? What does that do to cleaning services? What does that do to lawn care services? What does that do to janitorial services, construction services? You know, these heavy immigrants and also illegal immigrant sectors. What does it do to those prices? Well, they probably go up, but so would the conditions. That's something that we don't hear about so much. We talked yesterday, friend of the show and patreon.com/NEWZ debate supporter MC Funk mentioned, oh, you know, you're going to have a $40 orange. I don't think that's ever going to be the case. But let's say it goes up 4 times what an orange costs today. Okay, that's a problem. We can discuss that. But the benefit of that is the people who are doing that fruit picking, and I'm guessing in Florida, if it's from the United States, or maybe Texas, California, they all grow oranges. Those people are going to be better off. Those people are going to have more rights. They're going to be taken care of. And also, nearly 100%. What's the percentage of Americans who don't pay taxes? I'm guessing really high 90s pay taxes. Let's just say 99% to make it easy. 99% of those workers are going to be paying taxes, which is astronomically higher than the level of illegal immigrants who pay tax. We've already looked at the numbers. It's not possible that it's anywhere near that. So to go back to you, Apostate Nate, what do you think about that? Is that something that makes you think maybe you'll start erring more on the side of the law rather than the side of being just and moral?
I mean, Lee, at the very least, it pushes me back in that direction. It is it's a sobering thought to me. I think that a lot of us on the left are quietly okay with migrant workers being paid next to nothing. I mean, it's literally slave wages at times. I mean, I remember, growing up, listening to the news cycles much more ferociously than I do now, and hearing stories of migrant workers being paid well below federal minimum wage, for hot, hard, back-breaking work. And these are human beings that were okay doing this for, low wages that we would not put up with ourselves. Yeah, there's tension here, Lee. I'm in a pickle. Apostate Nate is in a pickle.
Would you yourself be willing to pay more for many manual labor focused services or food, produce, that sort of a thing, if that meant worker rights are increased to anyone, illegal workers, Americans, legal immigrants, whatever it might be? I'm not so sure my answer is yes, to be honest. But what about you? Would you pay a significantly higher price for immigrant heavy industries and products if it meant people were treated better?
In theory, Lee, I think I would. The question is what can I do? I'm hardly independently wealthy. I'm just an English teacher from southwestern Pennsylvania. I don't know that I always have the luxury of going for that fair trade option. And that's something that kind of haunts me too, that I do have to engage economically in ways where there are some things about the transaction, who's selling it, with how they treat their employees and pay them, that I don't like very much. The answer for me is yes, but I don't know if I'd be able to.
Well, as you know, I love shopping at Walmart. So that's why my answer is probably no. I've already made a choice that I prefer the prices at Walmart, and I just don't engage with any of the people who work at Walmart. And I just look the other way when I'm standing next to fellow shoppers at Walmart who are just like not the type of people I often want to be around, to be completely honest. Going to a Target, the clientele is noticeably better dressed, better smelling, better looking. Hey, maybe I'm not, anyone's top prize either, but um yeah, I feel like some people go to Walmart and they're like great prices. I go to Walmart and my first thing I think about is, oh yeah, now I'm surrounded by the people who shop at Walmart and the people who work at Walmart. Maybe I'm a terrible person, but I put up with that because the prices are noticeably better. So, yeah, it goes back to what you said. What can we do? I don't think anything I do has any real direct connection to how people are treated or anything else. I think you would have to never shop at Walmart again for the rest of your life. You'd have to like actively boycott Walmart. You'd have to reach out to your representatives and go to city meetings and be like, we don't want Walmart in our town, that sort of a thing. And most people, even if they're passionate, are not going to be able to do that. And I certainly am never even considering trying to do that. So I agree with you. What can we do? Well, I certainly could take a moral stand and pay more for everything. And I choose not to. So if I could increase the prices of many goods and services to help illegal immigrants, Americans, legal immigrants in the workplace, I think I would say no. Because in the United States, without national health care and without many of the social safety nets that exist pretty much everywhere else in the developed world except here, all we get are low prices, specifically with electronics and goods, not necessarily groceries. Go to Europe, the groceries are better and oftentimes cheaper. It's surprising, right? Other parts of the world, the same thing. We have some of the worst groceries options and prices around the developed world. But cars, computers, TVs, electronics, man, some of the stuff in the US is cheaper than the countries it comes from. And if that's all we get, plus tons of guns and lots of free speech and individual rights, I don't want to get rid of that. That's what we do. That's like going to Germany and be like, hey, everybody, Chocolate's bad for you. Hey, Lee, shut the fuck up. This is German chocolate. It's really good. Hey, it's really bad for you. Somebody shoot that guy. It's Germany. It's hard to do. Whatever you got going in your country, there's benefits and drawbacks of living wherever you are. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by getting rid of those. So I guess maybe I'm trying to legitimize the fact that I don't care about people, but to be honest, I think that's a real benefit of living in the United States is that we have a lot of cheap stuff, and I don't want to see that go away because we don't really have that much else. We have much less going for us than other places. Let's ask President Trump about this, not specifically immigration, but Mr. President, there are a lot of industries like agriculture, construction, service industries, lawn care,
Folks, let me
where
tell you,
the
nobody
conditions are
knows more
not
about
very
great industry.
good. Is that something that we need to worry about, or is it more important to just keep the prices low?
Let's be real, folks. Prices are a big deal, and we need to keep them low, but we also need to make sure that people are treated fairly. It's a balance, and I'm the only one who can make that balance happen. Believe me.
But Mr. President, if it's a balance, what's more important, worker rights or low prices?
The American people want low prices. They want to be able to afford the things they need. And that's what I'm focused on, making sure that our economy is strong and that people have jobs and can afford to live the American dream.
In the United States, I think prices are more important. If you live in a very socialized country, you can have higher prices because you're not going to be homeless and you have options. You can go through school and in some cases get paid to go to school and have school be free on top of that. And then by the time you get out, you'll be able to make enough money to pay for the high prices in your country. But in the US, where we have almost no protections of any kind, I think the generally low prices are important. Of course, it matters where you live, urban, rural, and then rurally, maybe the prices are better, but there's less options. It's always a trade-off. But I'd say more so than the American dream, what really makes America America is the fact that poor people have flat screen TVs. That's a real slice of Americana. Now you can argue, hey Lee, in rich countries there aren't really poor people, and so everybody has flat screen TVs too. But like the amount of poverty that we have in the United States, coupled with the amount of flat screen TVs that you can get for a reasonable price at Walmart or online at some retailer, that's I think what it truly means to be American. That and just the enormous amount of fast food that we have. So then Apostate Nate, back to you. What would you said you don't want to be the person who has to enforce this, and I completely agree with you. But if you could pick a president, if the election was today and you had more than basically two options, which is the unfortunate Republican Democrat system that we all have. If you could vote for one of like 10 different candidates who equally had a very good chance of being the next president, taking over the White House for 4 years, what would you like to see their immigration policy be? Both letting people in and dealing with the people who are here illegally. If you could pick, how would you like to have it play out?
The first thing I would probably do is some sort of an amnesty program designed to reward those who, albeit they broke the law getting here, but since they've been here, they haven't really been a drain. So I would want an amnesty program. Logistically, I really think that's your best chance. You can't possibly deport everybody who's crossed into your borders illegally. And if they're going to be here, it's my view, you may as well make the best of it. So I would want an amnesty program, and I would want a deep, hard, serious look at how long it takes for someone to fill out the paperwork and make their way to the United States. I don't think it's entirely stupid to have immigration laws, rules. You can come here, you can't come here. But there are people who wait 10, 15, 20 years to seal this. And to me, that's a bureaucratic failure, and it makes me less sympathetic to the whole.
Are you
to the whole
aware of
idea.
wait times to become French or to become Italian or to become Japanese? Like when you say it's a failure, is it because it's taking too long or is it because it's taking more time than other countries? How would you define failure? Apostate Nate, you're with us on Twitter Spaces. You are muted. Can you jump back in? Otherwise, I'll give you some more time. So I'm not sure if something popped up on your end and you're not able to. Oh, here you go. So now, Apostate Nate, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. I could restart Twitter Spaces again for now the third or fourth time, if necessary. All right, you're back with us as a speaker, Apostate Nate. Can you unmute? Hey, there you are. Or you were. Yeah, something's happening. So I'm going to restart Twitter Spaces. Let me do that. All right, Apostate Nate, are you back with us? Oh boy, this might be a sign that we should just hang it up for today. I'm really glad we didn't have these issues yesterday.
Lee, don't hang it up. I just got my audio back.
Hey, there you are. All right. Well, we'll try it one more time. So yeah, when you talked about the wait times, are you talking about that's just too long for any country? Is this too long compared to other countries? How would you define that as a failure?
So I would define the wait times that we had discussed on the show yesterday, for example, as a failure, and I would really pin that failure on any country who put up those sorts of numbers. People don't live forever. Okay, I think a sign that your immigration system is broken is that it takes damn near a generation to get a lot of people through the door and stamp them. That doesn't sit well with me, and that administrative lack, inefficiency to me makes me less sympathetic to those who are upholding the letter of the law. At that point, I'm just like, well, I mean, I guess you are, but there's some parts about, there are some facets to this law that ain't too great in my opinion. And as such, I'm not quite as thrown off balance when the law is violated in such a case.
So now I'm trying to take a look at some other countries. And I feel like a direct comparison doesn't quite work for some reasons that I've learned over the years. So, for interest, for example, can't talk. ChatGPT says U.S. immigration wait times, especially for green cards and citizenship, are slow compared to most other developed countries. In some cases, ridiculously slow. And so it talks about green card. In the US, family based 1 to 20 plus years based on the relationship and the country you're coming from. Employment based 1 to 6 years, sometimes longer, due to per country caps like they have for China and India. Then there's more things. And it doesn't look good compared to Canada, compared to Australia, compared to the UK, compared to Germany, compared to New Zealand. But let's look at each one, for instance. So if you compare it to Canada, Canada gets to select who comes into their country because they only share a border with one country, us. So when you go into Canada, you're much less likely to be illegal, like an insanely less likely to be illegal. And they can control who comes in. So they're dealing with less of an issue than we are. There's way, if you even if you compare the percentage of people living in Canada and the US versus our legal immigrants and their legal immigrants, it's much lower. So of course, when you're dealing with less, it's easier to get things done. It's easier to have more open borders, if you will. But really, no developed country has a border more open than our own, which is the current problem that we're now facing. So I would say just looking at wait times to compare it to Canada is not appropriate. Then look at something like Australia. This is a really interesting example. You can get a citizenship status in Australia after 4 years of legal residence. And total, it takes about 5 years, give or take, to go from I just moved to Australia to I'm now Australian. However, Australia is an island nation. Once again, they get to highly select who comes into that country. We do not have that. Nothing close to that. Also, what this fails to show is that Australia has a phenomenon called boat people. And if you come to Australia via boat illegally, you are never allowed to go back to Australia ever again. Not to visit family, not for a conference, nothing. You're not allowed back in the country. And in fact, there are, I think, two main places that Australia pays to accept people who are deported from Australia when they arrive via boat. We have nothing like that. Even under Trump, we have nothing like that. So once again, Australia has lower wait times and much lower times to become a citizen, but the penalties for illegally going to Australia are way worse than anything we've ever had here. So that's not really appropriate to look at either. The UK, also an island nation, no longer part of the EU. And that was a big thing with voters who voted against being part of the EU, whether or not they got bad information about other instances. Being part of the EU tied their hands when it came to immigration. They couldn't stop people from coming to the country. They can now. So I wouldn't say that's a good example either. Then Germany, you can get permanent residence about after 5 years. You can become a citizen somewhere between 6 to 8 years. Germany is a country that has been more open to immigration than some other European countries. I think Germany has made some choices that other countries were afraid to make. They have seen some pushback. They've seen a right wing rise in Germany because people are getting tired of all the immigration to the country. They feel like it's not German anymore. But once again, credit where credit is due. Germany has done more for immigrants than most other nations in Europe. So, golf clap. But once again, Germany is a country that has tens of thousands of American forces still there. They don't have to pay for their safety. We pay for their safety. they still have historical limits on what they can do militarily because of World War II. Granted, they were kind of the evil power in both wars, but definitely more so in World War II. So that's one we remember. Um, this is maybe a better comparison because Germany does have higher immigration for Europe. But once again, if we have tens of thousands of American troops and other servicemen in your country, and you're surrounded by other rich countries, not Central America, not South America, um, even with open border EU policies, air quotes open border because it's not truly open, it's just open to other EU citizens, and it creates more likelihood that other people can who aren't supposed to be there. It's still not the situation we face. If you took the amount of illegal immigration we have over the last several decades and then matched it to other countries per capita. So they didn't get the same amount we got, but they got the amount that they got based on how many people live there. Germany would be less open to immigration. The UK would be less open to immigration. Canada would be less open to immigration. Australia, which has some of the strictest anti immigration policies in the developed world, once again, boat people, they would be less open to immigration than us. So it's sort of like if you have a friend who has like 12 brothers and sisters, and you talk about how they all have to live in rooms with each other, and there's like a giant room for boys, there's a giant room for girls. Okay, those living standards are lower than a family that has 3 kids and each kid has their own bedroom. But when you look at the total amount of kids in one house versus the other, can you really compare that? And then you start comparing camaraderie. Maybe the kids all get along and like they can field a softball team on a weekend, with just the entire family. Like there are benefits to having a full house, if you will. In some ways, maybe you can't compare the families. And imagine the family where each kid has their own bedroom. They live in a really, really dangerous neighborhood. And it's not a great place to grow up, where the kids that have one giant room of 6 boys and one giant room of 6 girls, they live in a gated community that's great and safe, right? So you can't just compare the numbers a lot of the time. So that's why I think that it's not a bad idea to look at other countries, especially if you look at all the factors like boat people in Australia, or the fact that Canada shares one enormous border with one other country and it's the only world power. But I see diminished returns on these sorts of things. But yes, to answer your question, apostate Nate. Oh wow, I think Twitter Spaces just died on me and it's not going to work anymore. Yeah, it's dead. Oh boy. Yeah, that died. Okay, we're just going to wrap things up then. I'm not sure what's going on, but it is not working today. Today is bad luck day. Okay, well, we had a great 4-hour show yesterday. So big thanks to everybody who joined me yesterday, as well as Apostate Nate and a few people over on Stereo who joined me today. We're just going to wrap things up. I think I know when I've been beaten, and today I've been beaten by the internet gods. Big thanks to everybody. Hope to have you join me again soon. Bye-bye.